What the world needs now is love, sweet love.
Let them fight.
Sweet love.
Now I am become death,
Sweet love.
the destroyer of worlds.
Sweet love.
You have your fear, which might become reality,
Sweet love.
and you have Godzilla, which is reality.
Welcome to Transmissions from Neo Monster Island, Episode 2. That absolutely slammin' single is brought to you by local artist, activist, writer, DJ, musician, convention organizer, sneaker enthusiast, and all-around amazing human being, Preach Jacobs. He was kind enough to let me use this song as an instrumental to open my podcast with. It reignited my enthusiasm for the craft. And honestly, without him, I might not have ever tried to do this episode. If you aren't following him on the Instagrams or Facebooks, well, my friend, you might not be as interesting as you lead everyone to believe. Hear me now, believe me later. I'm broadcasting from the Jet Jaguar Juice Bar. Many people know that JJ loves Godzilla, humans, and revolution. But they don't realize his true passion is small batch blended punch, punch, punch! I'd like to thank all the Godzilla fans who got that joke, and everyone else, you're just gonna have to play catch up. Before I address today's extra heavy topic, I'd like to thank those of you who not only were brave enough to listen to all of episode 1, but actually left encouraging comments. I was so taken aback by all 2 of them, I actually decided to make this second episode. Never underestimate the impact a few kind words can have on your fellow human being. I really regret having to delete that episode, causing all the comments to get lost. But I had uploaded the wrong file and had to re-upload the right one, so history teaches folly of man, blah blah blah.
When mankind falls into conflict with nature, monsters are born.
As always, I speak politics here. I'm not required to give equal time to the other side. When you hear this voice, you should know it's reinforced by research and facts, not just my own equally hungry ego or a YouTube conspiracy blog. And I'm going to be voicing a few unpopular opinions. But as always, I'm trying to expand what it means to be a kaiju fan. So get comfy, relax, open your mind. About to drop some history knowledge on you. Our main topic of discussion tonight is the 5 footsteps of the atomic monster. The first Godzilla film is a protest piece of art against the use of atomic bombs. Believe it or not, there are still people who don't know this, or who actively choose to ignore it. Some of it's willful. People want to watch a stupid monster film and ignore the allegories and subtext, and sometimes even the plain text. If you're that type, fine, I get it. The world's a burning dumpster fire, filled with napalm, gasoline, and old forum reactions from Godzilla 1998. Escapism is comfortable, safe. However, I cannot tell you the number of times, daily, I get into arguments online because I dare to bring up politics in someone's dumb monster flick. I'm accused of reaching too far to bring the actual subtext up in a discussion of kaiju films, as if there was no political intent or hidden message in the art. But art does not exist in a vacuum. Each Godzilla movie is crafted with the seasoning and ingredients of the social, political, and sometimes even the religious events of the time. Let me teach you of the 5 weapons of mass destruction that came to build Godzilla's creation and legacy Let me speak to you in the language of the atom. How did we get here? This is where that thing called politics comes up, that people claim they don't do when they're online, and they can get upset when you bring it up, and then use bad faith arguments and logical fallacies to argue with you. What am I saying? You've been on Facebook and Twitter before. Why am I explaining this to you? For our history on Godzilla, I guess we should start at the beginning.
I know it's springtime for Hitler and Germany. Deutschland is happy and gay.
Yep, that's right. Godzilla's origins are set in fascist Nazi Germany. It's ultimately what set events in motion. But I don't want to turn this into the History Channel because it definitely wasn't caused by aliens. We're going to narrow our focus here. It's World War II. America is pulled into the conflict by the events of the Pearl Harbor attack. But at this time, the Germans are working on their own atomic weapon because of the discovery of fission. A group of German scientists who had defected to the U.S. plead with the president to help them build the bomb first. This starts the infamous Manhattan Project and the very first atomic test, Trinity. This is the first atomic bomb detonated ever. I'm not going to be going into the science of any of the bombs or how they work. That's just too heavy for a Godzilla podcast to get into. I'm trying to use broad strokes so you get the bigger picture, and because it gets the fence painted faster. But this device changed the world, not just in terms of war, but technology, science, research, even photography. That had to change so that people could film and record the bombs going off. Heading the event was one J. Robert Oppenheimer. If you're familiar with him, you already know this famous quote after the test was completed.
We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
Look at that stunned face, that quiet demeanor. This is a man who knows he has done something that cannot be undone and cannot be unlearned. Even though he initially strut with purpose after the detonation, he knows that a thing has been unleashed on the world. America now has its big gun. Quick fact. The explosion causes sand at the test site to be fused into a glassy residue called trinitite. My wife bought me a piece that I keep next to my Godzilla NECA 1954 figure in a glass case. Now let's take a moment to review that Oppenheimer quote in a more modern context.
We knew the world would not be the same. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture. Vishnu takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
Trinity would immediately lead to the creation of Fat Man and Little Boy, the bombs that would be dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These detonations killed between 129,000 and 226,000 Japanese citizens, only 20,000 of which were soldiers. So let me repeat that and put it in context. 109,000 to 206,000 civilians, non-combatants, men, women, the infirmed, children. I told you this was going to get heavy. People were vaporized so violently that they left ash shadows embedded into the buildings they stood next to. The Hiroshima Memorial is one of the few buildings that were left standing because it was directly under the blast. Those who survived faced a hell on earth that post-apocalyptic fiction just doesn't describe properly, and a slow death of radiation poisoning. I know people like to think that the post-nuclear future is a survivalist, crafting, first-person, open sandbox shooter. But the reality is, it's much, much worse. A caution to the Neo-Monster faithful. This is going to be graphic. Those who survived the initial atomic attack were marred for life, with deep burns on their skin called keloid scars. These were formed by the heat of the explosion. Those very scars served as an artistic inspiration through their incorporation into Godzilla's design. He is not covered in scales. Since 1954 to present day, from head to toe, the Toho Godzilla has been covered in scars, representing the victims of the first atomic weapons used in war. This should give you a new and darker perspective on the toys and collectibles you purchase. These scars would not be replicated in the American productions of the monster we love, including the Hanna-Barbera Godzilla, Marvel Comics Godzilla, 1998 Godzilla, or the MonsterVerse Godzillas. You can draw your own conclusions as to why. I want to go off script for a second here. There's a lot of debate that goes on about were we justified and was it right to drop the atomic bombs. My opinion is that we shouldn't have. We get taught in school that Japan would have fought to the last man, woman, and child. And a big thing that gets brought up is, hey, it's already happened. There's no sense in debating it. But I feel that if we don't debate this, if we don't bring up these important discussions, we're going to repeat these terrible moments in history and make poor decisions again. And maybe next time a lot more people die. The next test would be some of the more famous. I'm talking about the events at the Bikini Atoll. These weren't just scientific tests. These were media events celebrated and captured on film. The first test was Operation Crossroads Able. You might be somewhat familiar with it in passing, but the one that followed it is the most famous, iconic atomic test ever filmed. And believe it or not, every single one of you is familiar with it. That's right. Operation Crossroads Baker. These are the opening credits for the much maligned Godzilla 1998. This did not take place in the French Polynesian Islands, although the French did engage in massive nuclear testing of their own. Derelict ships were gathered for the testing of this nuclear shot. Goats and other animals were tied down, alive, so their corpses could be studied after they were killed by the atomic bomb. American soldiers would watch these terrible devices as they were detonated, as if this was a beach party. Then they would be sent onto the ships that survived and try to remove the radiation with scrubbing chemicals and seawater. Many of these soldiers would become infected with radiation poisoning, and then when they went back to their ships, they would contaminate everyone else. For side viewing, I recommend you harden your heart, steel your stomach, and watch The Bomb, available on Amazon. Don't watch the Netflix one. It's some weird avant-garde music video and isn't going to teach you anything. Watch the one on Amazon. It's worth the price. It will tell you more about what happened to these poor men, left to fend for themselves by their own government. Oh, and here's another modern review. Even if you burn the TriStar Godzilla from your memory, do you remember this revisitation of Operation Crossroads Baker?
3,
The next bomb would be the herald of the King of the Monsters, the final footstep on the path of destruction. Also taking place at the Bikini Atoll, now completely uninhabitable by the displaced natives, was Operation Castle Bravo. That's the name of the Monarch headquarters in Godzilla King of the Monsters. The test was definitely referenced in the opening scene of the 1954 movie. In terms of energy released, Castle Bravo was about 1,000 times more powerful than each of the atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II. And the thing was, it wasn't supposed to be. It had a higher yield because of errors made by the designers. When initially detonated, they thought they had cracked the Earth. The radioactive fallout would come into contact with the Japanese fishing boat, the Lucky Dragon No. 5. The crew thought it was snow and scooped it up with their bare hands. Most of the crew became contaminated with radiation sickness. One died. One had a deformed stillborn child that died. It was an international incident. This was dubbed a second Hiroshima. The United States denied any responsibility, of course, but eventually paid a sum in today's dollars of, $52,800 to each crew member. Oh, that's what's considered the cost of a human life and a stillborn kid. Okay. These are the 5 footsteps that would inspire the Godzilla 1954 movie. Producer Tomoyuki Tanaka was inspired by The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, the re-release of King Kong, and the Lucky Dragon incident. He saw a chance to make an anti-nuclear statement. The Herculean efforts taken by Honda, Tsuburaya, and Nakajima are legendary, and much better covered in other historical media. But these 5 steps, these destructive, man-made, hellish steps, are what brought us to the first Godzilla film, the beginning of a 65-year-plus legacy. But that wasn't the end of nuclear testing. Since 1945, more than 2,000 nuclear explosive tests have been carried out around the world. The United States has detonated the most explosions, 1,127, including the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Soviet Union is second, with 726. In one test, the United States government would position American soldiers a safe distance from the detonation. They would have their backs to it, hunched down with their hands over their eyes, which were closed and covered with welding goggles. Even with all of this, they could see the bones of their fingers and hands when the bomb generated its terrible light. A hardened sergeant started screaming for his mother. Others would start crying or laughing. When it was appropriate to remove the goggles, one soldier looked at 2 of his comrades and remarked how their uniforms were tattered and hanging loosely off their limbs. But it wasn't clothing. It was flesh. Just think about that. Just absorb that knowledge of what we did to our own men. If you want to debate whether or not the Japanese deserved what they went through, what happened to them in World War II, what did our soldiers do to deserve being experimented on by their own government? We did this. America, land of the free, home of the brave. We created a demon that we would not be able to bottle, and whose use would be threatened against us. We cannot unlearn the bomb. It will be with us forever. Carl Sagan once said that the nuclear arms race is like having two men in a room soaked with gasoline, and both of them are stockpiling matches. You really only need one to burn everything to the ground, but we keep making them. Mutually assured destruction. To this day, the Japanese Godzilla is still a warning of atomic fury. 5 bright flashes of light in the sky, each with a tail as big as a kite and a voice as big as the sea. I grew up in the era of the Cold War. Nuclear annihilation was a reality. So that's maybe what drew me to Godzilla beyond the young boy appeal of giant dinosaur. Today I hear too many people say they actively ignore Godzilla's message, just because they want the human characters to shut the hell up and let the stupid giant monsters wrestle. And you know, that's a goddamn shame. So many people were killed to try and promote a message of warning the human race of its own destruction. A race too deaf to hear. Yeah, that was a little bit heavier than I thought it was going to be. Let's see if Jet Jaguar can freshen this cup with some Baileys and whiskey. Let's take a second with Kid Kaiju.
I got nothing.
You got nothing?
I still have to think of what I'm going to say. I love you, Godzilla.
It was really hard to keep the focus of this on the 5 bombs that would shape the imagination into Godzilla. Because the story doesn't end there. History branches off into dozens and dozens of stories, both positive, negative, and ambivalent. I have a positive story that comes from all this death and destruction. But this video is long enough, and that's for another podcast. Also for another story, how the legendary Monsterverse strips Godzilla of his atomic and nuclear urgency. They know the beats, they know the words, they know the Easter eggs to throw in there that are catnip to us longtime fans. But they're meaningless. I love the Monsterverse, but it's so much artificial sweetener designed to pass harmlessly through the system without any of the guilt brought on by the real history. My final words to you are that we need to fight to leave a better world for those who will replace us. It's okay to love Godzilla for the dumb monster fights, the collectible figures, and price-to-stream content. But you cannot forget why Godzilla even exists in the first place. You, the fandom, are his heralds and apostles. You are his voice. His. And those who died making him a reality. Thank you if you made it this far. I really do appreciate you taking time to listen to me, even with my minimalist production values and terrible, terrible lisp. I actually did enjoy putting this together, and I hope you got something out of listening to it. If you did, please consider subscribing and sharing, and visit all the different links to see my artwork, webcomics, memes, and other nonsense that I'll leave in the description of the video. I want you to know that I love each and every one of you. We're going to get through this time of crisis together. You are important. You are worthy. And you are already doing the right thing. Peace. Always peace.
Sweet love. Sweet love.
Maybe because Godzilla is inside each one of us.